Hello and welcome to Four Simple Questions. My name is Whan. In this episode 6 of Series 1, we bring together Anjali Bhatt, a neuroscientist studying the effect of psychedelics on the brain at UCL and King's College London, and Richard Lang. Richard is the main exponent of the headless way developed by Douglas Harding. Whenever I introduce the non-duality, speakers or teachers, I often refer to them as first-person scientists, and I probably first heard that in the Douglas Harding book, The Science of the First Person. So there's no better person to explain this self-inquiry based on robust scientific experiments in which we can expose the fact that we can't see our own heads. This dialogue is a delight. I really enjoyed filming it, and I hope you enjoy watching it. And please subscribe if you haven't already.
Who are you? Would you like to start, Anjali, or shall I start? Which would you?
Why don't you start? I'd be curious to know what you say.
So would I. Who are you? Well, I would say that there are two sides to me, the outside and the inside. What I look like to you now, sitting in this chair, Richard. And I'm aware of being Richard, I would say, through you and others, as if I'm looking through your eyes. I'd say that's self-consciousness. So I can't see Richard, but through you, I empathize and have a sense of who I am. And as Richard, I was born in Yorkshire. I'm 70. And when I was a teenager, I was interested in spirituality. And when I was 17, I went to the London Buddhist Society Summer School and met Douglas Harding there, who wrote the book on having no head. And he did some experiments with the people there, just about looking to see what you are for yourself. So incredibly simple. Richard, notice you can't see your head. So that's the inside story. The outside story is what I see in the mirror and what you can see in the camera. But what am I for myself? See, when I look, I find just a headless body here, and my hands disappear into open space. See? So it's a private thing. And so from the inside, I'm looking out at this vast open awareness that has you in it now, and Gordon and Ewan, and everything, really. So I'd say, who am I? I from the outside, at a certain range, I'm Richard. And from the inside, I'm space for everything. And I believe you are too. That's my initial card on the table.
Okay.
What do you think?
It's interesting. I think the idea of outside and inside sort of resonates with, I would have said the easy answer and the less easy answer. I guess for me, the easy answer is I'm Anjali. I'm a neuroscientist. I am Indian. I grew up in Northern Ireland. The reason that that's the easy answer, I suppose, is that those are all the things that have influenced who I am. But the essence of who I am is something that you would have to infer based on that information, based on the things that have influenced me, which I suppose is a sort of outside view. And that inference is the essence of me, which I suppose you could only experience directly if we had a genuine connection of some sort.
And could you say more about what you infer, or that inference, or that essence? What else might you say about who you really are? We want to know who you really are.
I suppose, I think that would be easier to actually experience if we were doing something together. But I'm thinking perhaps of flow states, especially shared ones. So if we were, I don't know, making music together or making art together, or something like that. In my world, the sort of a world of art that I connect with the most is probably either literature or theatre, words are important to me. So I think, I think that would give an essence of who I am in a sort of more experiential way.
So I suppose in my language, because I talk about the view out and the view in. The view in is what I look like from them. The view out is my view out. But my view out overlaps with your view out, you could say, in this conversation. Or if we were playing music together, then view out would be overlapping a bit. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and certainly from sort of the neuroscience perspective, especially now we're sort of rediscovering some of the things that along the lines of exactly what you described in terms of having, creating your sense of self based on how other people perceive you. And that there's that again, a process of constant inference of who you are, of yourself. You're created by that inference, and the information that feeds that inference is how other people are interacting with you.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have this idea that there are four main stages in our lives, which are the baby, the child, the adult, and the seer. And in terms of the headless way, I would say the baby is headless. You're pre-verbal. And as a baby, I didn't know who I was. I didn't have feedback yet that I could understand because I haven't got language. I hadn't understood that the mirror is a reflection of me yet. So in that first stage, I don't know who I am and I don't care, right? I'm just open. So in my language, I would say I'm headless, I'm space of the world without knowing it. And as I'm growing up, I learn language. And through language and learning about the mirror, I start to get that feedback, that understanding of how society sees me. And underlying it all, I would say that society tells me I'm something. I didn't even know that before. And on top of that, that I'm a boy and I'm Richard and I live in this country and all of that. Now, as a child, I would say that I'm moving between being space for the world, carefree, not knowing who I am, and taking on board my identity. As an adult, I've totally taken on board I'm Richard, and I've forgotten about my true nature, which is the space, you see. And then I would say my work in the headless way is to point out that space again, whilst remaining aware of the inference or the feedback, you see. So you've got both, see. So that's, I would fit in that inference, that feedback, just is what life is all about.
Yeah.
That's the only way I could know myself, except for my true nature, which is what I experience now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would very much align with that. I very much agree. It strikes me that that sort of, having the stages of development is quite aligned with the psychotherapeutic view of a self that develops through stages. And I know that that's your background is in that. Do you think you were influenced by that or that world of thinking?
Well, yes. I was a psychotherapist for 30-something years. And I did not introduce the headless way because people hadn't come for that. But that's where I came from. And basically, the experience of my true nature is an experience of openness and indeed of empathy and of a bit like walking alongside someone. I take it for granted that you're looking out of this open space like I am, but you've got a different view. So when I was with a client, I would that's where I was coming from, without necessarily talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had the same experience, or at least I'm a big fan of Carl Rogers. So there's this this idea of just holding a space for a person and their true nature, and just allowing it to come, the empathy element, which was so surprisingly radical in its time.
I know. No, I love his work, and hit the way that I think it has influenced me. The way that he trusted people. He ran this group that I remember reading years ago, where it was a sort of weekend group. And he just told the group, right, over to you. And they were first angry. Hey, you're supposed to be telling us what to do. But after a while, they realized he was trusting them. And that in that way, they grew. And with the Headless Way, I would say that I share the Headless Way in terms of pointing out to people if they're interested. You can't see your head, your hands disappear into it. Looking out in a single eye. I have your face now instead of mine, with face to no face, you see. So simple. But then the next thing is, well, and how do you respond to that? It is handing over and not telling people, essentially, but trusting people. Yeah.
Would you say that, because that has so many implications, would you say that there is a different way that you see yourself depending on who you're interacting with? So whose eyes are you seeing yourself in?
Oh, yes. Yes. I think one thing with that is that everyone's view of me is different. And at center, I don't find something. I find nothing, or awareness, you see. So there's nothing to weigh their view of me against. The only thing I can weigh their view against is someone else's view. So I, as it were, take into account what everyone says, and you can't really reject any view of you because nothing at center to compare it with. So yes, one discovers one is very different for some people.
It's interesting because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, actually. What does it mean to be seen or to feel seen? It's such a big theme, and I would say it's a fundamental human need. But when it comes to actually defining what that means, it's actually quite difficult. And I think it goes, of course, beyond actually the visual sense. So it's much bigger than that, of course. I wonder, especially given your thoughts about the Headless Way. I'd be very curious to know what you think.
Well, you see, I say that I don't see my head here, but you see it over there. So there's a region around me where I am Richard. Further away from the moon, I'm the Earth. You see, and I take that on board. And even further away from the star, I'm a star. We're very close on a cell. But at this range, you see my head there, and I see yours here. Like I record it like camera. I've got your face now. You can't see it, so I'm sort of receiving it. So we call that reflection, like a mirror reflects it. But then I sort of project it back, because if I point at you, I don't point here. I point there, and I place that back. I say you're there. So it's in a funny kind of way. I'm out there in you looking back, and I'm here looking out. And that's empathy, you see. That being, it's kind of in two places at once.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, empathy, I think, is at the core of it, that sense of being seen or feeling seen and understood. And that's what, I think that's why it fascinates me so much, because, again, it's one of those things that when you really scrutinize it, it slightly eludes definition, and yet it's so important. Like a lot of things, I mean, a lot of my research is on psychosis, and there's an interesting confound there where, on one hand, if you ask a clinician, it's very clear that you know if somebody has psychosis, you can see that they're very ill. But when you try to start to define it, you end up in a very unusual, very fraught philosophical space, because the definition, if you look on the NHS website, is to perceive things differently from everyone else. But we all perceive things differently from everyone else. So it's interesting. I think the same thing, or something similar, applies to empathy, and yet it's so important.
Yeah. I would say that. See, when you're a baby, you're just open, and there isn't any developed sense of me and you. Growing up is learning which one you are. You don't know before that. We forget this. And you have to look in the mirror, and you have to listen to others. And you take on board who they say you are. There's no option. You can't survive if you don't. But what happens is that you, in a sense, you see yourself as others see you. So I can't see myself directly. So that's empathy. So growing up is the development of empathy and of seeing yourself as others see you. But by the time we're an adult, that's the only way we see ourselves. So I see myself as you see me. So I'm kind of out to lunch. And I have this idea that I'm behind the face here, you see, looking out at you face to face. And that obviously is just profoundly important in terms of understanding how others see you and all of that. But what it does, it puts a barrier between you and others. My face, you see, just put in simple terms, between me and the world. And when I actually, without discounting what you say I am, and every time you nod, I'm adding, aren't I, to my little kind of understanding of who I am. You know, does Anjali like me? Does she understand me? You know, all of that. That's all going on for all of us. I think, are very good at reading people, seeing that as so that we can survive. But now, with the Headless Way, what I do is I say, well, okay, I've got all that, and I need all that. But what am I from my point of view? Now, that's quite courageous, I think. Just to pause and say, all right, society, I get it, and I can't do without you, but what am I from my point of view? And that's what Douglas Harding did with his work. He said, I just looked. It's incredible. Starts the main book. Starts the main book saying, what am I? Who am I? I'm a man. Hang on. Surely nothing can have gone wrong so far. Hang on. I'll look for myself. Oh no, I'm a headless body with the world on my shoulders. Right? I'm, for myself, I'm this vast openness that is free and clear and still and spacious, see, for that. Now that suddenly, that is big book. And this model, you see, which I showed you before, this is me at center where I am nothing, no one. And then this is me at where you see me from, as it were, personally. But if you came up to me, I would become cells, right? And then I'd become molecules. But if you went away from me, I'd be London and then the planet. See, so I've got flares. This is a different way of seeing myself from the social view. So I am banging the drum of alongside accepting who you are for society, bring into the picture who you are for yourself, which is utterly different. See, and then do your best to make sense of it.
So how would you convey that a sort of internal essence of who you are?
I would just say, if to someone who's interested, you would just say, well, at the moment, I assume you can't see your own face. I can't see my face, you see. And if I do this, my hands disappear into for great emptiness or void or space and come out magically, see. And the field of view fades out all the way around into nothing. And when I look at you, I see your face, but I don't see mine. And I'm assuming it's the same the other way around. And so, I mean, actually, headlessness is the easiest thing in the world to share. Nothing to it.
I'm curious, actually, because I have a slightly cheeky question for you, I think. What if I were blind?
Well, I have blind friends. And what I say you do is, I would say, well, you close your eyes and you attend and ask yourself, how big am I? Or what shape am I? You see. And when I do that, I just go, I can't say. And I don't find a boundary. And the thoughts and sensations are arising in this space. So vision is an easy way because you can actually point. One of the experiments is you point and look at what you're pointing at. But if you don't have vision, you are that nothingness full of everything. And put aside what you've learned, and it's the simplest thing, you see. And I mean, you might be interested in this theory of mind.
Very much so. Yes.
Okay. Well, here's my take on it: is that when you're a baby, your thoughts and feelings, in as much as are just part of the scene. All right, just like the sound of the bird, and then the feeling of hunger is all part of the view out, I would say, from nothing, see. Now, as you grow up, you are taught that some of the view out, your thoughts and feelings, are behind your face, and the rest is outside, see. And so if I imagine a little dragon running across the floor, I think it's real. Until someone says, we can't see that, you see. So that's called imaginary, and that is behind your forehead somewhere, whereas the rest of the world is outside. So I'm learning to go outside, see myself with a surface here, my face, and I'm learning that some of the content, the thought of the mind, is behind this space I can't see, which means that you can't see it. So it's private, you see. So that is the development of understanding that my thoughts and feelings are not public property. And therefore, when I look at you, because I can never experience your thoughts and feelings, see, but I now say, well, you must be like me. Behind your forehead somewhere are thoughts and feelings. See. So I grant you the mind as well. You see. So it's a developmental thing. And when I become headless, when I see I'm headless, now I say, well, actually, it's just like it's always been. My hunger or my thoughts or my feelings are arising in the space of awareness. And they're different from what I see, but there's all kind of there. Right? And this is what I call now no mind. So now, alongside the theory of mind, because I accept that you can't see your head, I believe you can't see your head. So now I have the theory of no mind, that where you are, your thoughts are coming out of nothing. See, the Zen tradition of no mind. So it's very liberating that one's thoughts are at large. When I am at large, I'm big. I'm not. Now that is very healthy, you see.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think I would be even more radical than you, actually.
In what way?
I would say that it's not just vision that or that's not the only sense with which we're inferring the world and ourselves, particularly. I would say it's everything. We're inferring it all. And there's some interesting research that's currently happening in this sort of world of the Bayesian brain, the brain that's, this is why I keep bringing up inference, the brain that's predictive, that's constantly actively predicting the world. But in the world of infant agency, for example, how infants gradually, it's similar to what you were describing, but how an infant that doesn't know anything about itself, including its own, the limits of its own body and its ownership of its own body. So it's a really fascinating area of body ownership research in neuroscience at the moment. But this early stage of learning which actions you own is fascinating. So, you see babies doing a lot of motor babbling and sort of moving of their limbs to try and essentially sample what they own, what comes from me, what comes from someone else. There's a really nice experiment called it's a baby mobile experiment, basically, or a mobile conjugate reinforcement, where basically it's just a baby with one of its feet tied to a baby mobile, the other foot is not, and you sort of gradually observe them to see how they start to change their kicking behavior, which they inevitably do, because they start to realize that this exciting, moving, colorful these objects which I like to see, I can control them with my left foot, but not my right foot. So I start to realize that if I kick my left foot more, they go through a phase of a sort of aha moment, where they realize that, oh, I have control over this, which is very interesting.
So that's learning ownership, learning responsibility.
Yes, which I would say very much corresponds to knowing yourself or differentiating between yourself and others. You need to know what actions you own, what you control in the world, in order to know where the limits of you are and where everyone else starts, I think. Yeah.
I would be even more. We're upping the stakes here.
I like where this is going.
I've got to have the last word. I think you see that as a baby, you don't have a sense of ownership or understanding. Now, as you say, you learn that. And that is an essential skill, if you like. Now, when I see who I am, on the one hand, I see there's nothing full of everything, and everything is just arising. It's a common thing in the non-dual world. It's just arising. It's nothing to do with me. It's just happening, you see. So I get that. That is one end of the spectrum of detachment and freedom and all of that. But the other thing is that now that I have learned to identify with this body and take responsibility for it, when I see who I am, I see there's no boundary. See? So now I say, well, where does my ownership and responsibility stop? There's no actual boundary. See, I extend into the tools I use. Could I or into my car, or my house, or my country, or my planet. And so I think that the development of that sense of ownership and responsibility is a fantastic thing. And then, one end of the spectrum, we apply everything is my responsibility. Everything is me, you see, as well as nothing. See, and you wouldn't be able to genuinely begin to develop that, because it's a developmental thing. That feeling that you are the world and you are responsible for the world. If you hadn't gone through this process, it's essential.
Well, that's immediately where my mind goes. Actually, when you talk about the development of a self, or this at least what I hear is in your description is the optimal development of a self. But immediately where my mind goes is what happens when you don't get that, mirroring or that feedback. And of course, there's all these classic experiments of the lack of mirroring, and what it does to a child as it grows up, what it does to their theory of mind and their empathy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I would say it's the old story of the prodigal son, or you have to leave home in order to be able to appreciate it with fresh eyes when you come back. And if you don't go away, you don't have that appreciation of and so if you do not have that mirroring, if in a way you haven't been out and seen yourself as separate, lots of obvious reasons you can't function, but that does mean that you don't have the joy of returning to your true self and seeing it with fresh eyes, because you've always been your true self. You're not. I've never seen my head here, but as a baby, that didn't mean anything to me, and I had to go out and get that mirroring and take on my head and be Richard. You see, now the contrast, between that which is deeply in my psyche, that I'm Richard, the contrast between that limited person and my true nature. Oh my God, that's the wow that comes with having forgotten. And I would say that I'm always moving out and in. You see, I'm always going out and identifying with Richard and then coming back. And that rhythm is a very healthy, creative, rich kind of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. That particular concept of the true self and the false self fascinates me. I think it has become a bit of an obsession of mine lately. But I think it's very strongly tied to this idea of unmet needs, and particularly that need of being mirrored, of having someone who reflects back your emotional state in a sensible way, in something that, in a way that makes sense of the world for you.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that don't get that.
I know. You know what I've also noticed? I've been around the Heaven's Way for 50 plus years, so I have a lot of experience with it. And what I mean is that the experience is being amongst friends who are sharing this, you see. It's just a kind of...
sharing their experience of unmet needs. Or,
of their true nature.
Right.
In a mini society where everyone's aware that, put it rather crudely, you can't see your head instead you've got the others, but all of that. So, in other words, what I'm saying is that in that community of friends, whereas in a normal community, you're getting the feedback all the time. So, verbally and non-verbally, I'm saying to you, you're Anjali. But just the way I'm looking at you, you feel looked at. So all kinds of non-verbal signals are telling me that you see Richard here, and I'm doing the same to you. So there's that feedback, and that you need. Otherwise, you're lost in a way. But then, when you become aware, I would say, my observation, when I become aware of my true nature, I'm now just noticing something about myself that is just, I would say, immense. Right? Now, when I am with others, my friends who are also aware of it, then we can talk about it. And that is another kind of mirroring. I'm now mirroring back to you that you're just like me. You've got this fantastic openness for everything. And although this is a kind of private experience, what isn't, but it is really supportive and interesting and rich to be with friends who are also aware of it, because you can mirror it verbally and non-verbally.
Yeah.
And this is a fantastic, rich aspect of living from who you are, is having friends who understand that. Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say it's the most beautiful thing in the world. To perhaps the only thing that really has meaning for a human being, to have that sort of connection where there is space for your true self or your true nature, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's ultimately an act of communication or connection, which can, like we were talking about in the beginning, it can come from, sharing music or a conversation where things are actually flowing back and forth, or a dance. And people talk about that. It's so interesting when, the surface can be the same. We can be talking to each other and not connecting. Or we could be saying the same words and having a really meaningful connection where that true nature exists. And how to define that difference? It's the biggest difference in the world, and yet it's really hard to express.
Yes. Well, beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah.
You reminded me also of something that Sam Harris described. Actually, I know you've spoken to him before. About I think it was his first experience with MDMA, which he's talked about in quite a lot of detail. And that sort of, I think the thing that really struck me about his description, which since then I've heard other people describe as well, was he described that mental chatter of being aware of how other people were seeing him. That those little cues of, do they like me? Are they smiling a little bit? Those sort of melted away under the influence of that particular drug, and it allowed him to feel extremely connected to the person that he was in the room with, which is exactly what MDMA is known for doing. That it's an empathogen. Is my new favorite word.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I would say that seeing who I really am, my self-referential thoughts or my judgments or my thought, all of that kind of thing I think you're mentioning, rise and fall like the tides, and that all goes on in this unchanging space of awareness. And so I have come to the view that those moments when it dies down are fantastic and are very healthy. With whatever way you get to them, I suppose. I don't take those substances. And when I was 20, I did. I don't know what it's about. But I would take the view, I do take the view, that that will always be happening. And that's okay. Now, the thing also, in terms of connection, you see, I take the view that the space I'm looking out of doesn't have an address. I'm not in the room now. The room is in me. Now, that me I'm talking about is this vast consciousness, which is not, you're in it. And it's not too. So, especially, I think that whether the other person is aware of that is secondary, because if you're aware of it, you're kind of where they are. But if they are, well, you are on the same wavelength. And that is the Buddha apparently was asked, what is the holy life? He said something like this. He said, the holy life is friendship. He said, there's not a half, there's the whole. The whole of the whole life is friendship. Yeah. Well, I like that, Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I like this idea of sort of concentric circles of selfhood, like the model that you showed me. And it did strike me that when you described the headless way, or the experience of not having a head or a face, there's somehow both a story of embodiment and also not being important. I don't know what you would say about that, but it struck me that on one hand, it would also align well with this idea that we construct ourselves based on our bodies. Hence, why I think a lot of people in that field of body ownership or embodiment wouldn't be so compelled by the idea of a brain in a vat, because our bodies are so important in terms of experiencing who we are fully. On the other hand, there's so many other concentric circles that make us who we are, our social environment, or the physical environment, etc.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that's similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, I would. My view is that the view out is my mind, and the view in is my body. I can never see my body directly because it's the view from outside. I only see my mind. So I'm in my mind, I'm saying whatever I'm aware of, and not just my thoughts and feelings. Now, at this range, you see Richard. See? So my body is Richard, and in a way, my mind is at this range. But if you were viewing me from Mars, then you would see the Earth. And I would say, now, my body is planetary. See, and it takes time, I think, to kind of feel your way into that. It took time to feel your way into being a person, right?
Yeah.
And if you came up to me with a microscope, you'd see a cell. That's my body at closer range, you see. So my body has layers and my mind has layers. Because, this range is human, then planetary, galactic, you see. So I say that we are living this. I in one moment I think for Richard, and then for my family, and then my country, and maybe hopefully the planet, and then I'm back down to Richard, and then I'm to my knee. So this is very healthy. Our sense of self is expanding and contracting, with, of course, within this unchanging awareness. So yes, body and mind are just the same thing, seen from different angles, really.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have a sense of who I am, to answer the question?
What?
Do you feel like you have a sense of who I am now? Seeing so that's the question that we were asked to answer.
Yeah, I think there are more questions. The next question.
Yeah.
If I can read Ewan's writing. Question 2, Anjali. Are you ready?
Sure.
I don't really understand this. What is this?
What is this?
Your turn to start.
Okay. I suppose, given what we've just talked about, the way that I would interpret it is, what is this? So what is this interaction that's happening right now?
And what do you say to that?
I think it's sort of a conversation. I mean, obviously, but it's something that, given that we've never met each other before,
Yeah.
at least in my experience, and of course I can't know yours truly, but it's something that I've gradually settled into. The sort of the essence of me has little by little sort of settled, while the sort of all the other little things have fallen away, and the actual content of the interaction is front and center. I think it's been enough time now that is the case. But of course, when you first start off, the little things like am I sitting in the right place, or
I turn my phone off.
Yes, exactly. All of those things sort of are in the way, and somehow that keeps and that's interesting, both the true self, if that's what you would call it, from being fully present, but then therefore also it slightly compromises the interaction. And the less that is the case, the more we have a genuine interaction, I guess.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, that is a kind of what is what is actually alive at the moment. And what's alive is this conversation. Yeah. Oh, I like that. And I think that, you see, the way that we describe what it is going on is going to be different, isn't it? But we are experiencing the same thing, I suppose you could say. I would say. And yes, I something I was just thinking of earlier on, and then I forgot, that in religion you have call and response. Right? So the priest, I suppose, says something, and then the congregation reply. And this is not just one person declaring. This is a two-way conversation. I think this is just so kind of deeply significant. And that, you see, the conversation, who is having the conversation? Now, you see, well, at one level, it's Anjali and Richard. But I would say that my theory, which is a story, is in the beginning there was one. Well, before the beginning there wasn't one.
Interesting.
And then the one appeared. Right? Story. And you think, how did the one do that? That is the miracle that you are. The one is. How did I come to be, you see? I don't know, but wow. You know, that is worth. So that is the most, in a way, overlooked thing that you are. See? Now, so the one realizes it is and thinks, that is fantastic. That's the best thing that's ever happened. You know, the only thing that's ever happened. I would love to share this. But there's no one else. I'm the only one who did it. Right? So obviously, what I need to do is divide into many, forget I'm the one, become a person, and then awaken to being the one and many, so I can talk to myself as if I'm talking to someone else about myself and lots of things. So I say, at one level, this is the one talking to itself.
Interesting. It's like that. I can't remember who said it, but we are the universe. Maybe it's Carl Sagan. We are the universe that is observing itself.
Yes.
It strikes me as that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. And that is a living universe. See, yeah. And you see, I find when you're growing up, you learn all the skills of society, and you hopefully learn how to respond to people, and all of that. And the worst thing that you can experience, perhaps, is that you don't know what to say. You see, I've got to have something to say, otherwise I'm a loser, right? Now, I say, well, that is a skill that you might develop, small talk, or, it's the kind of common response. It's ping pong. It's like you say something, I say something. It's just hardly matters what you say. It's the kind of back and forth in a way. And then when I become aware of who I really am, I notice, this voice is just coming out of nowhere. I don't know what I'm going to say next. And when I listen to you, I say, your voice coming out now, and you don't know what you're doing.
And that's very reassuring. Because nobody knows what they're going to say.
No. But then when you sort of accept that, and you're not throwing out all the skills you might have learned, then that's the living, what is it, isn't it? That's the living river, or whatever it is, you see, whatever it is.
The flow.
Yeah, there you go, you see. And it's not me and you anymore. It's something.
It's us.
Yeah,
yes.
That's right.
You touched on something that is also very interesting to me. Speaking of psychotherapy, where you don't know what to say next. And the thing that's I think is fascinating is what people see in silence, because silence is also a mirror, I feel.
Yeah.
From what I've experienced myself, I would say it's a mirror to your own insecurities, because that's what we put in there. What is the worst possible thing that can exist in this gap? So I thought a lot about that, and I wonder if I can ask. What do you see when there's silence? What do you see in that mirror?
Well, I first came across the Headless Way in 1970. And after about 8 years, I went to live in a Buddhist meditation center in England. And I was interested. I wasn't moving away from the Headless Way, but I wanted to find out what others were doing. And I was there for 4 years. And after a year, they trained me, and I led 10-day retreats for 3 years. See, now you sit a lot with eyes closed in silence. Now, for me, it was not an experience of, I've got to find my true nature, I've got to find my true nature, is it going to come this retreat next? It was, I'm at home. I'm choosing to be quiet and still. Now, what I found was that in those moments when nothing is happening and you don't know what to do or say, if you just stay with it, something will arise that surprises you. That isn't the next logical thought. It comes from deeper down. And I found, when I look back, I realized that was 4 years when I took time out to listen. And to listen beyond yourself, to yourself, as it were. And so, whereas normally society will say silence is a bad thing, you don't know what to say or do. The other side, but very much the Taoism, is return to the root. See, return to the root and find out what is, and it doesn't know until it comes out. See, it's not like it. So I still feel, somewhat anxious if I don't know what to say. I mean, that is all normal. But now I also, I'm aware that the silence of my true nature, just the wonderful thing I would say is when you look at the nothing, but my God, how creative it is. Coming up with this, what is it? It's coming up with this conversation now. See, that's creative. Creativity isn't just this thing and that thing. It is the present moment. And shall I tell you a little story?
Yes, please.
Well, I was watching a program with interviewing Jane Goodall, who was, you know about her?
Yes, I'm a fan.
And she was talking about her work with chimpanzees. And she was observing to what extent the behavior of chimpanzees was similar to humans, and there would be a kind of connection. And she said that in the evening, I think, the chimpanzees would go to this waterfall and they'd look at the waterfall. And when they were looking at the waterfall, they'd do a little dance, as she interpreted it. You see. And then she said something like, because they're looking at this waterfall and they're seeing that the water's always coming in and the water's always going out, but the water's always there. How does that work? Always coming in, always going out. So in the face, this is what she said, as I remember, in the face of this mystery, they danced. They didn't write a thesis, they danced in celebration of this. So I say, looking out the nothing, there's mystery, you see. Nothing, mystery, is a present moment. It's it, It's like a waterfall. Present moment is always coming in, always going out, always there.
That's beautiful.
The party.
That's very beautiful. I know, I love that. And indeed, I would say that sort of, I spoke of the fears that people see in silence, and you spoke of what happens when you allow for it, to both yourself and, if it's with another person, what happens in that interaction. And I think that's probably why it's so difficult, because it's so important, or it's so it's so big to I think it's ultimately what we want to be. I mean, with another person, to be able to sit and be silent with them and feel comfortable. That's one of the most meaningful things in the world. And similarly, to be able to sit with yourself and be comfortable. Also one of the most meaningful things in the world. But I think that's why it's so scary in the first instance, especially if your mind has always been so busy, which, in this modern world, we very often are.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, society is 24/7 telling you not to be silent, not to be doing nothing. You're a loser. You're an idiot. You don't know what. You know what I've noticed I run a lot of online headless way groups. They're drop-in, they're free, and over the years, a community has grown. That means that people come 3 or 4 times a week and they get to know each other. And then we have gatherings, so they meet each other in person and then come back. Now, what I have noticed over the years is a maturing of the group. What I mean by that is that, to begin with, silence is uncomfortable. But after a while, people begin to understand what's happening. In other words, see, if I don't know about my true nature, which is silent, then I don't know about yours, and all of that kind of worry goes on. But I think it needs to be articulated. I think it needs to be named for people to learn. What I mean is that when you name in a group, when everyone is aware of the headless, with my terms, when everyone is aware of the headless, and you talk about it, it becomes normal, right? it becomes normalized in that society where I'm space for you, you're space for me. It's wonderful, but it's normal. And we're just talking about reality. Now, when I also articulate the fact that the silence where you are is full and it's creative, it's not a dead silence, and not a threatening silence that way. It's just, so be with it and something will arise. Now, when you're in a group where you know that everyone else is aware of that, that makes a difference. If you don't know, you think, what will they think if I'm just silent? See, but when you know that everyone else is resting in that creative silence, see, and learning to not just tolerate it, but welcome it, then I think that is an example of how, when awareness of your true nature starts to get out into society, how it changes us, how it relaxes us, how it gives us an understanding of each other, and a potentially, when you are articulating it, that you can rest in that. I'm on journeys. I used to do a lot of work with Douglas Harding and travel with him a lot. And I think he once said to me, he said, Richard, we don't have to talk all the time. So we'd spend long journeys not talking. Now, I knew exactly what he was doing. He was being spaced with a woman, you see. That gave me permission not to have to do the talk. Just, I think it needs to be kind of acknowledged in a way. Yeah.
Absolutely. To have that spaciousness for someone else, to allow for someone else to truly exist. I don't think many people achieve that, but it is achievable, certainly. But there's a hard obstacle, or many even to meet. And I think that's what I meant when I said that we see a mirror to our own insecurities in silence. So, and I think it's important to be able to name them in the first instance, to be able to get there, to be able to get to that spaciousness. And when I first looked in that mirror, the thing that I saw, I think at the core for me was guilt, actually, guilt at taking up space. So I didn't feel comfortable to sit in that silence or allow that silence. I felt like I had to fill it because I felt like, am I taking up too much space? Are they interested in what I have to say? Can I take my time? Should I, or the impulses to rush and speak very quickly because, they might get bored.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I know what you mean, yeah. Well, I have this phrase that we are dragged, kicking and screaming into heaven.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we must kick and scream, I think. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We grow up and we learn all these rules and these kind of social norms. And that is deep in us, and that is all too good, but my God, it plagues us as well. And when you come, having been out like the prodigal son, and you come back, the story of the prodigal son is a Christian thing. There was a brother who stayed at home. And the prodigal son went out and got lost, you see, and eventually decided, I'm going to go back home, and was prepared to be a servant. He thought nothing of it. My dad will not welcome me, but I just want to be back home, and I'm prepared to do the kind of, the lowest job of all. Now, as soon as his father saw him, he welcomed him, and he threw a party. And I don't know if it's true or someone was adding to it, but the brother who'd stayed at home said, what about me? I've been here all the time. What about me? You haven't thrown a party for me, you see. And it is this going out and this becoming a person with all the difficulties that entails. And when you come back home and you're welcomed by your true nature, it doesn't mean to say that all those difficulties are suddenly resolved. You keep going out and back, or what? So I have this theory that, the difficulties in life hide gift. Now, do I always recognize that? No, you see, but kicking and screaming into heaven.
That's so interesting, and that story, the prodigal son. I think it's a beautiful metaphor, especially what you say about that comparison between the brother who stayed at home and the one who didn't, and what about my party? Because what do we, or the thing that it brings to my mind is the importance of rupture and repair in creating that meaningful connection. That what happened with the prodigal son was that there was a rupture and then there was a repair, and that created that step was necessary to get to a place of celebration of a self or of a connection, which I think is a huge part of that journey, to being able to sit in silence with someone. I don't think you get there without having had that rupture and repair. Yeah. You have these friendships with various kinds where you've never really had a fight, and it's very lovely, and you've been very we've always been kind to each other, and it's wonderful, but you've never had a fight, and there's something missing.
I better be careful.
I wouldn't say it's the only way of getting there, but I think it's a very significant way of getting there.
Yes. Yes. Many years ago, 20 years ago, which was some 30 years after I first saw I was headless, I had panic attacks. And it was a big shock. Well, it wasn't a huge shock, actually, because I figured out that the panic attacks were my fear of being seen, self-consciousness, feeling frozen like a rabbit in the headlights. I, like most people, had become self-conscious, and it was a bit of a problem, but, you ride it out and it goes. And when I first came across the Headless Way, Douglas Harding used to be, as a young man, extremely self-conscious, but he wasn't when I met him, and I never saw it. In 35 years, I never saw it. It's just remarkable. And he used to say, well, you can explain it lots of ways, I suppose, but he would say, it's because I'm saying I'm kind of invisible. I'm not, it frees you of being a thing. Well, you still understand you are, but you're kind of freed in that way. And I thought, I want that. Well, it did help, but it didn't make it go away. And I thought, I learned I wasn't doing anything wrong. It's just normal. But then, about 20 years ago, it erupted. It was like it finally came out when I look back on it. And it lasted a year or two, not in panic attacks, but in a kind of disabling effect of this anxiety. And throughout that period, I took the view that this was something that I needed to learn. Although I did say, all right, now I know that there's something to learn. Why don't you teach me in a more easy way? But no. But what came out of it was that two things. One, I had to sort of understand for myself what was happening. Secondly, I had to say yes to it. I had to receive it. See? So what I understood was that this sense of self and other hadn't always been here. Wasn't here as a baby. So when I was a baby, I was the one without that feeling of separation. And like with everyone, that grew up in the space until it took over and I forgot the space and I was just separate, right? Which you need to do, I would say. But I then said, well, why did I, as the space, come up with that? Why did I create that sense of self and other, taking the view that everything flows from the source? What I'm talking about before, it's so I've got someone to talk to, right? A sense, a deep sense that you are not me. that you're other, you see, is what is no good if I say to you, you're just a picture of my consciousness. See, it doesn't have the same power of relationship as if you're a total mystery. You're not, you know. So that is obviously what I wanted, because I say that what I get is what I want at the deepest level. So when I understood the reason for it, then it helped me say yes to it. You know, say, oh, okay, I get it. That is a way I can understand it. That it's the one that come up with a way of having another, right? That other. And then I start to say yes to it. And the thing that you say yes to is different from the thing you say no to. And so that kind of welcoming and saying yes. You see, I think that as life unfolds, it just delivers and delivers and delivers. Now, it delivers in the ways you don't want it to deliver, but necessarily. But I believe that with being aware of my true nature, I think you get a realization, you get a revelation about things. I think that's incredible. That I've cracked it now. You haven't. That goes. You go into that period of loss, the prodigal son. You come back, and then an even deeper realization emerges, and you think, right, this is the eternal fountain.
The rupture and repair.
Yes. Again and again. Again and again.
Something you said really struck me, or the thing that really stood out. I mean, a lot of it did. A lot of it that was very, very striking. What you just said. But you know, when you said the fear of being seen.
Yes.
Finally, it actually made me feel like I see you even more somehow.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think it's such a common fear, despite the fact that, as we were just talking about before, there's nothing we want or need more, because, as we've sort of been alluding to, I think, and this is probably at the heart of the headless way idea, from what I can see, we need to be seen in order to feel like we exist.
Yeah.
And so the consequence of not being seen, of not having that need met, is that, well, we don't exist. We don't feel like we exist.
Yeah.
And then what happens? And I have, this is heavy, but I do a little bit of counseling for people who are suicidal. And the thing that I notice almost universally is that exact sense of feeling like nobody's ever seen me and I don't exist. So what's the point? So our very existence, our very drive for existence rests on the feeling that we exist to someone, which is an interestingly circular sort of problem, I guess.
No, I agree. It's so fundamental. In sharing the headless way, my general approach is that, in a way, I can't share it. I can only testify to my own experience and ask if you're in the same condition. And if you are, we can have a conversation about it. But one of the things I developed in groups, in workshops, was empathy, actually. It was taking the liberty of speaking for you. Now, we do this all the time, don't we? If we say, oh, gosh, you're looking happy or sad. I mean, you don't know. You're empathetic. You're speaking for anyway. Well, the first time I did it, I remember doing it in a workshop, and it suddenly came to me, and I looked across the circle in the workshop, And of course, I say, I can't see my head. My hands disappear. It's just wide open here. Everything is, there's no distance, no dividing line. All the sounds are in me, all the thoughts are in me, see? So there I am, hoping that people are going, oh, I'm like, you see. Then I looked across at this guy, and I asked his permission. But anyway, I said, but, where you are, you're absolutely vast. You don't see your own head there. You see, you're looking out this one single eye, see, and instead of your face, now you've got Richard, you see, and your thoughts are arising in this vast openness where you are, you see, and everything going on, and you see, and he was looking at me, oh my God, I feel like I've really been seen. And this was I've ridden that ride further down the river since then a lot, but this is not only being seen as a person, which is important, obviously, but being seen as who you really are. It's finally acknowledging in public, I'm the one, and. In a workshop, in Finland, I got people to come and sit next to me and face the group and say to the group, I am space for you, right? In public. Actually say it, normalize it. And because the group then goes, yes, rather than in ordinary society, they go, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? This woman came up and stood next to me and she said, I have been waiting to do this all my life, you see. Declare her true nature. I said, oh, okay, all right, go for it. She said, this is what I've been wanting to say all my life. I am God. I went, yes, you are. Now, you can't say that in normal society.
Yeah.
But wow, how important it is to be given a voice, you see, and for that be normal, you see, where people understand. I'm not saying Richard's God. I'm saying my true nature is, and yours. Namaste, right? See, I honor the one in you that is the same as the one in me.
That must have been so important for her, in the sense that I'm making a big assumption here, but I think a lot of children who are not seen or feel not seen, it goes hand in hand with feeling a lack of agency, feeling powerless. And those are the ones that are driven, they crave, I think what we don't have, we crave intensely, and perhaps even to excess, especially when it's a core need. And, the need to have agency over something, which, if you are as a child, you don't really know what's happening to you. And I think personally, my theory is that if that is something that particularly puts you at risk of being traumatized by something, not knowing why something's happening to you, and therefore not being able to control it, which is why probably, I suppose you could say that's why children are much more likely to be traumatized by their circumstances. But indeed, this is why therapy helps as well, because we gain an understanding at least of why things are happening or what is happening to me.
And sort of own it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you wouldn't be able to own it if you don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And you're not able to say that, this person has done this thing to me, or they are behaving that way because of what happened to them. That sort of thing, as opposed to just bad things are happening. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know when it will stop. I don't know whether I deserve it.
So what do you think is the role in therapy of articulating? What do you think? How is that? I mean, I would say that is quite central, but what is your view of actually talking, of saying it, putting it out, being heard? Why is that so therapeutic, do you think?
I would say it's very much exactly what you were describing. It's part of your true self, and it's allowed to exist and be observed. And in that act of observation, the existence is confirmed. And that's why you have to say it out loud. That's why, I mean, there's so much you can do yourself, self-help and all of that. There's so much you can do to grow. But I feel like there is one limit, and that is that at some point somebody needs to observe it. no matter how much you read, no matter how much you do, somebody has to hear it and pay testament to, yes, I see it too. But in order to do that, there has to be someone who's curious enough. And in the noise of everything we talk about, the noise of modern life, I feel like that's something that we're really losing, that ability to sit and be curious about someone else. And I think that's such a tragedy.
And I suppose when you are, two things I'm thinking, when you're talking with someone who is curious, as in therapy, presumably, that it is externalized or objectified, or it can somehow becomes more real in that it's now a social, it's shared, it's out there. And the other thing is that until you actually do say it, you don't know. They say if you want to find out what you think, write it down, because if you're only just thinking, it's woolly.
Yeah.
So it's in a way, when you say something, you can't take it back.
Yeah. And you hear it. I mean, in a way, you pay testament to its existence as well. There's a clarification process, whether you write it down or say it out loud. The words ring in the air.
So that's the call and response, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
The call is not enough. There needs to be a conversation, a recognition, and which is not just an echo. It is another angle on it, right? From a different person.
Yeah. It's landed somewhere. I think that's quite a nice answer to the question. What is this?
Should we see what the third question is? So now the third question is, why is this? I suppose my turn to
I think it's your turn.
Oh, God. Why is this? Well, on the back of your answer to the second question, which is, what is this? Why is this? Well, I would say that we're finding out as we go along, and neither of us had any idea of what really we were going to talk about. And even Gordon and Ewan, who you can't see, monitoring every little bit of this conversation, didn't know. So why is this? You see, I think I'll probably realize a bit more of the why in a week or two. You know, when I look back, when you're right in the river, you can't see the layout. You know? But why is this? And I'm meeting myself there, who is myself and not myself, and discovering what I think and feel through this conversation, and having the delight of another point of view for something. But I mean, as you say, what are we unless we are seen? And so what am I unless I'm seen and heard? So thank you for bringing me to life.
Well, I thank you for just the same. And I think that is a good answer, actually, to why.
Well, let me add something to it. There's something that Douglas found in a book by Lawrence van der Post, who studied the Kalahari Bushmen. And in one of his books, he was out with a Kalahari Bushman in the middle of nowhere, I think. And then out of the distance came another Kalahari Bushman, and I think to dramatize it somewhat, he ran up to them and stopped and slammed his spear down in the sand, you know, as you do. And then he said the Kalahari Bushman greeting to Lawrence van der Post and the guy who was with me, he said, I was dead, now I'm alive. Well, of course, with no one around you out in the bush, you're sort of dead, aren't you? But suddenly, when you're with someone, you come to life in them and them in you. And this, you see, is such a kind of deep thing that to die, to be born, you must die. See, and you when you come home to your true nature, to the nothing here, that is only half the story. The other half is that now see what's in it. In the nothing I'm dead, but in the something I'm alive. I'm brought to life now in you and in this situation and yeah. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think to stretch it to the perspective of society as a whole, and kind of where we get meaning and purpose from, and why we need to. I think why we are social in this way, and why we rest so much on being seen by other people to feel like we should exist. A thought that I've had before is that we've evolved such that it's. This is quite perhaps a cold way of looking at it, but we've evolved such that we need cooperation as a species, and I think that sense of belonging to something greater. I think without that, we don't have a sense of meaning and purpose. It's something so fundamentally intertwined between belonging, meaning, and purpose in that sort of social domain. Yeah. We feel like we have to belong. We have to be able to be connected. We have to matter. We have to have something to contribute to someone else's life in order for our existence to be worthwhile. That's why I think it can't be trivialized. It often is, but it can't be trivialized when somebody doesn't feel connected to the world. And I think that's why also we see some of the biggest psychological problems come about when people feel disenfranchised or disconnected from others.
Yes, this alienation. I think in terms of the Headless Way, when you see you've no face, you see there's no separation. I don't belong in society. Society belongs in me. That is profound belonging. But I think of you an image here, which I wonder if it will make sense to you. The field of view is constant, but things change in size within it. See, now you call that going up to things and moving away. But so if you imagine one cell, see, and it fills the field of view at that rate, if you've got a microscope. Now, as you move away from it, from the point of view of the field of view, other cells come in off the picture. You with me?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? And they come together, so now there's many, and eventually you get far enough away, so it's a person. And if you go further away, other people come into the picture, and eventually you get society, and you keep going up. So an interpretation of this is that in order to grow, you need to include others, and you need to include others. So if I can do that, you see, I can see myself as Richard, see, at that range, filling someone's view. But they move away, and then Anjali comes into the picture, and Whan and Ewan, and then Lund, eventually, and then you get the humanity. Now, I can do that, can't I? I can shift to include others and have a sense of myself. But Yeah, I think alienation and feeling cut off. See, when I attend now to what it's like to be me, I've learned that my body sensations are here and the world is there. Yeah, and my thoughts are here in a box and the world is there and my feelings. So I'm separate. Okay. All right, got that. You need to know that in order to be able to function as an individual. But when I attend to who I am, my body sensations are just everywhere. And my thoughts are at large. And there's no dividing line between the wall and my thoughts about the wall, or the world and my react. It's all one. Still understand the level in which there's a distinction. But that is just so healing.
Absolutely. The ability to zoom in and out of those levels, and particularly to have that sense of connectedness, I think is there's even evidence indeed that's healing. That's this sort of new area of research in psychedelic neuroscience. That's why. That's why we are interested in the first place, because it facilitates that sense of connectedness, which it's increasingly evident that it's that experience itself that is fundamentally important to why these particular compounds can be so radically healing and actually address the cause of an issue, of a psychological issue. More than the current medications that we have on prescription, which are sort of more of a band-aid, which is very interesting. But you did actually bring up the next question in your last answer. I think the next question was something along the lines of, what is it like to be me? I think you intuitively went there.
Cheating.
They did tell us what they would be, and I think it lodged in my mind.
What is it like to be you? Oh, well,
Yes.
you. This is you.
Is this my turn?
What is it like to be you?
I suppose that's the most difficult one in some ways.
Why?
For the reasons that have come up, and perhaps that have been written about very well by Thomas Nagel. What is it like to be a bat?
Oh.
Which it's the hardest thing to really convey. I suppose you can only really base your perspective of me can only really be based on what I tell you, which I will in a moment. But also the assumption that I'm similar to you. And this has been seen in various ways as well. But you assume, like you say, that I have no head and that I'm not seeing my own face because you can't see your own face. And I think that's important. So that's what informs the way you understand what it's like to be me.
Yeah.
Because the assumption is that it's similar to what it's like to be you.
Yes.
And that's maybe the best we can do is to guess based on our own experiences. That said, I can also tell you about what it's like to be me. But that is difficult, actually, now that I think about it. I think if we can talk about the things that are that feel good and the things that feel bad, I suppose, as a place to start.
Okay.
Because it's ultimately about how you feel. What is it like to be me is a proxy, I would say, for how do I feel.
Oh, okay.
And yes, sometimes I feel anxious as well. In that way, we're similar. But sometimes I feel warm and alive. And I think that happens when, in these moments, when I feel observed, when I feel like I exist in someone's eyes, as is the case right now. So there are all those parts, and I sort of move through them in my life, and they're constantly fluctuating, and it's like the waterfall.
So here's a question for you, Anjali, which may be differently answered tomorrow, but just now, what is the purpose of your life?
Wow.
What is your life about?
The word that comes to mind is connection, actually. Yeah. To observe and be observed. Truly, though.
And what does truly mean?
I think that's the operative word, isn't it? What does it mean to be truly observed? Because I think one knows when somebody's looking but they're not really seeing. And I think, that we talked about curiosity. When somebody's unadulteratedly curious about you, that is the space. To bring it back, Carl Rogers, actually, that is the sort of space in which you are allowed to exist and grow and play and be creative, where there's unconditional positive regard and curiosity and empathy and congruence, indeed. But to exist in curiosity and to be there's a line actually in it's a seemingly innocuous line actually in a book by Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and there's a scene where two young people are falling in love, and they say they talked and talked, hungry to know each other. And for me, I think that is the definition of love to me.
Yes. See, that it seems such a kind of basic desire to know yourself. One has happened. Don't spend the whole of your life not being curious about what's happened. That curiosity, that is a kind of appreciation of the preciousness of life. It's not, not to overlook the gift. Yeah,
absolutely. So, what is it like to be you, Richard?
Well, tomorrow I'll answer it differently, I'm sure. But I think that our conversation has led by fits and starts, for me, as it were, into a kind of appreciation of depth. And so the mystery out of which everything is miraculously appearing. And I think a conversation that includes that throws light on it again. It's not something, I know that. It's something that, at least for me, I sort of rediscover in the moment. So there's that. You see, one of I think there are two things that my life is about. One is about that curiosity and wanting not to spend the whole of my life sleeping.
Yeah.
Kind of, at least every so often, kind of pausing and becoming aware of who I really am, which can't be an idea. You have to come to it fresh. The second thing that my life is about sharing that. The sharing it is just so rich and seems to me to be so close to the heart of things. It's the living experience of it, sharing it with another who is yourself and not yourself. As I said, what is it like to be me? Well, it depends what is going on, doesn't it? And
depends who's asking.
yeah, and it's the asking has to be call and response. They can't. Even if you're on your own writing about it, you're talking to someone. You know someone's going to read it. They're going to come back to you in some way, not to you.
It sounds to me like one area which we are very much on the same page on, or something very fundamental, is the notion of constant change in what it's like to be a person, which isn't, I realize, isn't a universal assumption. And I think the people who have been raised on this notion of a static sense of self have suffered from it, because they're fighting something that's very natural.
Yes. Well, it is changing, so you're going to have a hard time, aren't you, if you
try to hold on.
Yeah, because you can't. Yeah. You know, I've been reading one of Douglas Harding's books, The Hierarchy of Heaven and Earth, where this model where it talks about the different levels and how you change. You see, I'm not just human, I'm my family, I'm my country, I'm my planet, star, galaxy. And this is not just a scientific observation, which it is, but it's very traditional. Dante's levels and the idea of angels, living beings of high order. Douglas Harding relates to these greater levels, celestial levels of oneself, and how it's just really interesting for me that when you realize you're not just human, but you have layers. It's connecting those layers of the unconscious with your actual physical body. You know, I am a planet, I am a star, I am a galaxy, but I'm not used to thinking in those terms. But the mystic journey is towards the God, is towards the whole. And you go through layers, levels. And when you move away from a level physically, you get an optimum view, a person, see. But closer to it is still a person, but just a head or just a patch of skin, and further away it diminishes. So there's an optimum range for every level. And then it disappears, and then the next level comes. So to move from the planet to the star, if you're looking at the Earth, you don't suddenly jump to the star. You move away, the other planets come into view, right? There's an intermediate area, and then finally you get star. So there's this intermediate region, which was called Lord of the Spindle, where you have to die to the previous level before the new level can arise, right? So this is the physical representation of the dark night of the soul, where you have to go through this loss before you can death and rebirth. See, now one of the layers is you move towards the whole, because as you're receding, you're trying to get more and more who someone is by stepping back and getting, the planet, the star, the galaxy. So one of the layers is the sun. And the sun is obviously light, heat, life-giving. And when you look at the Greek religions, there's a lot about the sun there, and the divinity of the sun. But also when you study the mystics and their journey, their pilgrimage towards God, often goes through periods of light and fire. The fire, light, fire, heat, warmth, you see, love, inclusiveness, and then a dark night, you see. And actually, so the way that we are built is this kind of it's fantastic. Yeah, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, except I love it. Yeah,
me too. Does it need to go somewhere?
So in this beginning of that book, where you move away through all the layers, having discovered you're nothing at centers. Now, in order to get greater and greater knowledge about yourself through the observer, because you can't see yourself, so it has to be through, there you are, again, the observer. And there comes a point when you realize that you can never get the whole picture in view. because you're always something looking. The observer is not yet included. So you step back to including. You see, it's never ending. So the only solution to actually getting the whole picture, we do this book, is to give up. You know you can't. And you return all the way to the center where you're nothing, turn round, and then you're room for that which you could not be. It's a kind of surrender.
It's that universe that turns back and looks at itself, like we said.
There you are.
Maybe that's a good note, quite a beautiful note to end on.
I think we've answered Ewan's questions, and he won't need to interview anyone else.
We've solved it.
We've done it.
We've solved it.